My name is Cassie Corley. I am a therapist in private practice. My office is in Clayton. I work very part-time at the cancer support community. I am a facilitator for the caregiver, one of the caregiver groups. I think there's 2 caregiver groups. And so I work there every other Thursday with caregivers. So it's a great place if any of you have been involved with it. It's a really lovely place. So otherwise, I have a private practice in Clayton. My specialty is sex therapy. I am a certified sex therapist here in St. Louis through AASECT, which is an organization, American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. So I was told that Heather Rasnick was the person who did the program 2 years ago. And even 2 years later, it's scary to follow in her footsteps because she's absolutely wonderful. She's the best. So she's a friend of mine, and I've watched her speak before, and she's hilarious. So I hope I can be half as entertaining and as informative as she is. So I do have my paper here. It's my security blanket. So I hope you don't mind that I don't have, you know, stuff all over. Danny's going to write for me if we need to. And one of the things I want you to know is that this isn't about a canned talk. I want to be able to answer your questions. I have information that I can give you, and I will start by that. But if you have something that you want to ask me, please raise your hand, because I know we only have like 45 minutes, which isn't a very long time for this. So, so I'm going to start with what I have, and initially it'll be just a little bit of information. It'll be a little bit, it'll be like 5 minutes before we get into the sex kind of stuff. So, but be prepared to ask me questions. And then I have a lot of stuff to show you and a lot of other information to give. So one of the things that I wanted to say was I've done different groups, and people usually laugh when I say, okay, so we're going to talk about intimacy or sex and intimacy. And they're like, oh my God, that is like the last thing on my mind, the very last thing on my mind. And so I never know, you know, whether I'm at a prostate cancer group, a breast cancer group, what kind of a cancer group I'm at, is that initially people, you know, say that that's not what we're thinking about. We're thinking about survival. We're thinking about, you know, maybe keeping our marriage together, or how do we get from day to day, or something. And I want to say that sex and intimacy would not be the first thing on my mind either. It definitely would not, but somewhere on the list it might be there, you know. And so I just want you to have this information because it's valuable in helping. If you're a coupled person, if you're in a couple, it's helpful in keeping people closer during a time of great stress, because as you know, it is a time of great stress. So, so I want to start off with talking about what intimacy is, and so I'm going to have you write, if that's okay. All right. So, if I were to ask you what you can tell me intimacy is, and we're going to have Danny write. What are things you think of in terms of intimacy? Just shout them out. Talking. Touching. Sharing. I'm sorry? Holding. Anything else? Okay, some of the things that I have: caring, compassion, closeness. You don't have to write all these because I've got them on here. Snuggling, cuddling, whispering, giggling, holding hands, massages, not necessarily, you know, feet, hands, back, front, touching, holding, what did I say that? Holding hands, intercourse, outer course. So I'll put those up there. So not that many of them have to do with sex. A lot of them have to do with closeness. And that's what I think of with intimacy, connectedness, being connected. So when we're talking about intimacy, we're not always talking about sexuality. We're talking about connectedness. And what I've noticed as I've spoken to different groups where somebody has had cancer is sometimes there is a disconnectedness that takes place because of the fears, the fear of touch, the fear of, am I going to hurt this person? I don't want to touch them. I don't want to hurt them. I don't know how they feel. Touch changes, and we'll talk more about that. And so there's a backing off. There's a backing off, and so one of the things that I think is important is how do we reconnect? So we start with, you know, some of the gentlest forms of reconnection. Don't forget to talk. Don't forget to look in the eyes of the person that you care about or the people that you care about. Holding hands, snuggling, whatever. Okay, so I don't know if, let's see. Okay. So one of the things that happen, or a number of the things that happen when somebody has a diagnosis is that there could be surgery, obviously chemo or radiation, and all of those things mess with our mind and our body and change the way we view ourselves and our comfort with ourselves. And so I have things like removal of parts linked to sex play, scar formation, numbness, hypersensitivity. Sometimes what felt good doesn't feel good. Chemo might decrease or alter sensations, cause nausea, start menopause at a time when that wasn't in the plans, have pain or numbness. Radiation might increase exhaustion. So a lot of changes to our bodies. Mentally, what can happen is we feel betrayed. Our body just betrayed us. How did that happen? Why? Anger. I'm really mad. I don't want anyone to touch me. I'm mad. So stress, you know, and all those things make for kind of a backing away sometimes from who we are, a little bit of a losing ourselves. Does that make sense to anybody? Okay. And then our body image. You know, am I still attractive? Am I a whole person? Part of me is gone. Okay, so survivors, this is a little bit of the psychology of it, which I know I'm, you know, kind of preaching to the choir. You all know this. But survivors go through so much that they may have some dissociative aspects. So that, you know, sometimes just to get through everything that you have to get through, your head's not, you have to like go away. You know, we think of dissociative in times of trauma. In a car accident, we don't remember things. We don't remember a lot of that. In abuse, you don't remember things, and so you dissociate. With illnesses like this, where you're going through a lot, there can be a dissociative. There doesn't have to be, but there can be a dissociative process. And so we go away. How do we get back? And that's part of what we want to talk about. How do we get back in touch with our body and our mind? Because it's really difficult to let someone else in if we aren't really there. So how do we begin with that? First of all, and I know you've heard this before, you take exquisite care of yourself. Exquisite care. A lot of us, especially, is anybody out there in the helping professions like me? Those of us who are involved in the helping professions know how to help everybody really exquisitely but ourselves. And so we have to really, you know, shift gears when it's time to do things for us. And so can you do the board again? All right, so some things that I was thinking of, and you can add to this because you're probably doing them, is how do we begin to get back to ourselves so that we can begin to share ourselves? You know, what do we do with that? So, meditation. Anybody in here meditate? Sometimes. A little bit, yeah. Yoga. Anybody yoga? Or depending on how far you are from, you know, surgeries and stuff. I know they have Zumba at the cancer support community, and there's a meditation class, and you know, there are those available all over. Slowing down, not putting so much on your plate. Exercising, people in touch with that. Journaling, document the changes. Has anybody ever been to the Labyrinth at Mercy Center? The Labyrinth is kind of an amazing place. It's a very simple stone walkway. It's not very big, it's not very fancy. It was put together by women who knew that that was a good thing. But it's a powerful, sort of a spiritual pathway. It doesn't take very long, maybe an hour. It has one way to go in and one way to go out. So it's not a maze, it's a labyrinth. And I think that there's some major churches in England and Italy that have labyrinths in them. But it's like being on a spiritual path. And it's about the size of this room. So, and it's on their grounds, on the Mercy Center.
So physically where?
Back to the right and kind of in the field. If you're standing facing the front of the Mercy Center where you go in.
The hospital?
No, not the hospital.
No,
not that either. There's a Mercy Center, I think, where the sisters live, or where they used to live, out off of Geyer. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And it's a very powerful place. We were there. Were you there for another day of a cancer workshop day? So it's a very powerful kind of a thing to go on and think about. Just letting go of pain, you know, feeling your pain, letting go of your pain. It's a powerful kind of a place. So, so I recommend if there's any labyrinths around that you consider that. That's the only one I know in town. I was in Columbia, Illinois for another conference recently, and they had a really gorgeous one there that was very nice to be on. So, so getting back into physical now. Okay, so what else can we do for ourselves? Restoring connection to ourself and our body by inviting gentle and non-sexual touch. We want to start with gentle non-sexual touch before we think about sexual touch. So a manicure, a pedicure, foot massage, full body massage if the therapist is comfortable working with cancer survivors, allowing yourself to cry, to grieve. There's no time clock. I don't know how long the period is of how long you also have survived. I see some people have a number of years. Yeah, and I can't read everybody's, but you know, depending on the length of time of your diagnosis, you know, maybe many of you have already done a lot of grieving, and maybe now you're celebrating life. You know, maybe it's more that. But recognizing that sexually and physically things aren't going to be the same. Sex isn't going to be the same, but it can be better. I know that sounds odd, but it can be better. As a sex therapist, I know that I see many people who've been together for a long time and they don't like sex, and they're pulling away from each other because it's gotten boring, it doesn't feel good, they don't talk about it, and that kind of thing. Well, when you are face to face with something like this, you begin to need to talk because things are going to be different. And so this is the time to make them maybe more like you want them to be. maybe it hasn't been the way, it hasn't been ideal. It's maybe a time when it can become more ideal. You can know your body better, and we'll talk about that. It can become more thoughtful, more planned out, sweeter. There's a lot of things that it can be. So one of the things that I was told about grieving is you can write a letter to who you used to be, a goodbye letter. Say goodbye to this person that I was, hello to who I am becoming. If there's depression, we don't want to forget the possibility of antidepressants, therapy and antidepressants that sometimes can get us out of the depression so that we can move forward. So, a lot of people think they don't want to change. Change is hard. Sexually, maybe you say, oh, I don't want to change. I liked everything the way it was. I grieve that. Okay, yes, you're going to grieve if it's different. But it doesn't have to be bad. The changes don't have to be bad. So let's start with yourself. How do you reconnect to yourself? And let me just start with when people, a lot of times people haven't, women, we talk about men masturbating and all of that. Women, a lot of times, they might. I've done a lot of sexual histories in my time. A lot of women say they've never done it. A lot of, some say they have. So let's just talk about touching ourselves, not in masturbating, but anywhere. How does touch feel to you? Where do you like to be touched? Do you like hard touch, soft touch, gentle touch, a feather? What feels good? What part of your body likes to be touched? Where are you comfortable being touched? And where are you, where is it hands off? Off limits. So where are you numb? Where do you have pain? Where does it really feel good? Are you dry? Is your vagina dry? And if it is, then that's not unusual, because when you've gone through all the medicines and everything that you've had to deal with, that can, if it's put you in menopause, then those of us that are in menopause know that our bodies change in that way. Our skin gets a little bit thinner, our vaginal skin gets thinner, and what's the word I want? It just gets very thinner, and it can tear, and it gets drier. And so what I do have for you, which I wanted to point out, is there's an organization in Wisconsin. It's called A Woman's Touch, and they have this what's called a vaginal renewal program. They are a women's educational organization, nonprofit, that I get most of my materials from, and they work with women and in regards to sexuality, how to enjoy themselves sexually, how to learn about things. They do a lot of work with people with cancer. So it's a drop-in store, as well as a place where you can get a lot of information. So they have this program because what they believe very strongly is that we can take care of ourselves and our vaginal tissues to keep it young and more supple without hormones. And so what they recommend, it's written in there, is using a good moisturizing lube, of which I have some here for you. And they have dilators, and they're actually in the process of creating some. So I'm not trying to sell their stuff, believe it or not. I'm really not trying to sell their stuff. What I want you to know is that it's an excellent organization for women, to educate women on their sexual needs. And it's owned by women, run by women. It is nonprofit, and they want to help people feel better. So that pamphlet, take the pamphlet and, look at some of this stuff. And that is, these do vibrate. I don't consider them sex toys. I consider them aids. Oh, there it is. So I don't know if you want me to pass this stuff around. I can. I don't know if anybody is uncomfortable with that. Just, you know, what I did do is I also brought some vibrators, because in the process of getting to know yourself and trying new things, then having something like your own personal, non-scary, pretty vibrators can help you find more information on what feels good, what doesn't feel good. Because when you know what feels good to you, then you can share that with whoever it is that's in your life. So that's the smaller wand. That's the smallest wand for to use with like the vaginal renewal. And this is the larger one. This is a dilator, kind of a mid-sized dilator. And I'm showing you these because it's not like you're going to go out and buy this stuff. You know, some of that stuff you might, but you wouldn't necessarily go out and buy a dilator. I have dilators in my office to help people when maybe they have not been sexual for a long time and they find that they're very tight. They're not able to have intercourse or be comfortable with penetration. And so we talk about how to gradually begin to work with that again with the lubrication, the dilation, things like that. Also, your doctors hopefully would talk to you about that. One of the things that I find is that a lot of doctors don't talk to people about these things, which is one of the reasons why I'm just throwing it out here. So I hope I'm not offending anybody with this. This is about mid-size. The first one is like the size of a pencil. And the other one is bigger. So I also brought for you, if you're interested, samples of liquid silk, which is a lubrication that can be used sexually in intercourse, as well as something that can help with moisturizing. So help yourself to that. What I wanted to show you, because when we think of vibrators and stuff, we think about, oh, we've got to go to a sex store or order offline or something. That's really gross. We don't want to go in someplace like that. This is a Trojan, and you can get these at Walgreens. Now, I did go to Walgreens yesterday because I have found that some of my stuff is not here anymore. So they didn't really have as much at my Walgreens. So anything that these purple ones are actually Trojan, and they have them in a locked case at, like Walgreens has them. This is a little ring that has vibrators on each side, though the vibrators are done vibrating. And then there are things like...
Is this at Walgreens too?
Yeah, they should. I don't know if their selection is very good anymore. This is a very small, like kind of almost like a purse or pocket vibrator. So, you know, just things that you can have that don't feel manly, that don't feel gross, that don't feel like, that can feel like it's just yours.
Exactly how do you
That's put on the penis. And then it vibrates, it'll vibrate on either side. So it doesn't do a whole lot, but it does a bit. So one of the things that I think is really important as you begin to think about what feels good and what doesn't feel good, and we've done some classes with this, but is doing a body map. Has anybody ever heard of a body map before? Body mapping? Okay, so these are some maps that I did. So that as you begin to get to know your body in a different way, it's like it's your body, it's not your partner's body, your husband's body, whoever's body, it's yours. And you know like what feels good, what doesn't feel good. one of the things I wrote is I love when you look at me and really see me. I love arm rubs, neck rubs, shoulder rubs. Feet are ticklish, use a firm touch. So I'm going to pass these around so you can see what a body map is. And maybe look at both of them because they're slightly different. And let's see. So those are things to help you kind of get to know yourself. We've done, at a couple groups that I've done, we've done body mapping, and I bring all sorts of stuff in, you know, so people can sort of sit and make it fun and fancy together. And then I've had, in my office, I've had men do that too, in regards to how they want to be touched, where they like to be touched. Because what I find is in couples, a lot of times people haven't really communicated about sex. They just kind of have blindly gone along and after however many years realize that things don't always feel really good, you know, or that their bodies have changed. So sometimes we'll do that together. So with a partner, you know, if you're going if you have a partner and you want to begin to prepare to be with your partner again. Oh, before I say that though, I want to show one thing. I know one of the ladies out there told me, oh, well, when Heather was here, she had a vagina puppet. Well, this is actually, it's a vulva puppet. So it's very, very sweet, very good for education, a way of showing people who are a little bit frightened and think that their genitals are gross to show them, you know, that it's more like a flower. And what does it look like? And, you know, it isn't quite like a beautiful flower, but maybe it gets a little bit aging and that kind of thing. It's still beautiful. It just changes. It's not maybe as supple if you're my age. So, but anyway, I'm going to pass this around too. I use this for educational purposes. They're great because it's got all the parts and it makes it a little bit less scary. You don't have to.
So do you use that when you do in your practice and in the programs? And do you have like a male puppet? And
you know,
use this as
I don't have.
for couples,
Do you know anyone who sews really well?
No.
I don't have a male puppet. I just have the female puppet. And I use it in my office when people say that they really don't ever look at themselves and they don't really know what they look like and they don't really know what their different parts are. And so I'll take that out, and as opposed to getting a diagram and showing where it, you know, is so clinical, this lightens the mood, because sometimes when I see people, women with vaginismus and some other kinds of situations where they aren't even able to have penetration and they really have never looked at themselves and they're not, you know, it's a whole different ballgame. And so in situations like that, I will use that as a teaching source to help people understand what their parts are. You know, where's their clitoris? Where's their, you know, what are their lips? Everybody's are different, you know, and that kind of a thing. So. Okay, so do we have any questions so far? Okay, all right, then I'll just keep going. All right. So if you're becoming active again, physically, sexually, intimately with a partner, then I think that there are some things to be aware of. First of all, knowing your body is really important, as we've already talked about. Knowing the time of the day that you have some energy, knowing what your boundaries are. You know, where am I right now? Do I want to touch, but I don't want to be sexual? Do I want to just hug and caress? Am I willing to be sexual with that person, but not really willing to have them touch me in certain areas yet? knowing your boundaries and knowing that you have a right to speak up for that, what you can tolerate at any given time, knowing that hopefully it will move forward and change over time when you get more and more comfortable. If you are going to be intimate, when are you not tired? When can you have no interruptions? Remember to be loving, kind, probably slower. You probably have to plan things. If there's been surgery, if there's pain in different ways, you might need the what we call like an aid of wedges. There are pillows and hard foam wedges that can be used to brace people or lift people or do things in a way that makes involvement, sexual involvement, more comfortable. And the other thing is, if you're going to start doing something with a partner, you know, what do you want to start with? Sexual or non-sexual touch? Do you want to learn, you know, massage? We have something in my work that's called Sensate Focus. I think it was that term was coined by Masters and Johnson. And Sensate Focus is a pretty specific way of touching, you know, of getting back to touching exercises with somebody. And like for me, what I do with people is I kind of evaluate their situation and whether they've been, you know, whether it's been an injury, whether it's been abuse, whether, you know, fears, whatever. Yes? Oh, okay, yeah. We look at what, you know, what would be the least threatening kind of touch to begin with, and encourage them to take 10 minutes each, and you're touching for different reasons. And I talk to them about, you know, touching for arousal, and maybe the other partner doesn't need to touch for arousal. That person may be already aroused. It's not about having to do anything. Sensate Focus is about non-demand for sex. So that, you know, it's working on the partner that's having difficulty getting comfortable again with sex, and in a time frame that works for the both of them.
So I guess the take-home message I'm getting really is that it's going back a little bit to the intimacy, and it's about talking and communicating, and communicating what, like for instance, communicating what I need and what I'm comfortable with at that time.
Right.
And
well, that's really important. With Sensate Focus, there's I actually have forms that I give out to people that say, okay, this is what it's about. This is what you're trying to have happen, and you know, and it's not about having sex. You know, where somebody might get aroused, it's not about having sex afterwards. It's about having it be no worries. We can do these exercises, we can do these touching, and it's not about having sex, so that a person can get more comfortable and feel safe doing these exercises, knowing that they don't have to have sex, even if their partner is aroused. You know, it's like you don't have permission to do that unless you both agree that that's what you want to do, because otherwise you may be less inclined to want to do these exercises again, and the exercises have an importance in you getting more and more comfortable with being touched, because afterwards there can be communication. It's about being gentle, kind, finding different kind of touch, stronger touch, softer touch, light touch, feathers, ice cubes, whatever, having fun with each other, feeling aroused, seeing yourself be aroused. It's supposed to be fun for the toucher, but the toucher is supposed to not create any problems for the person being touched. So that person has to be able to gently speak up and say, this is, you know, not what I want, or whatever. So I have a lot of, I should have brought some of that, I forgot to. So if anybody needs that and you want to tell Danny, I can, you know, and give her your address, I can send you some of that information. Okay, I want to have a little time for questions. So some of the things that I think are important are that we exercise. You all know that's important. Our body heals faster because we're flooding our body with oxygen and ridding toxins through our lymph. Eating healthy. The vaginal renewal program, I really would like you to take a look at that. Having an orgasm on a regular basis. The book says 1 orgasm a week.
Why? What is the benefit of that?
Well, that part of your body needs to stay alive too. The vulva vaginal area needs to have blood flow. Needs to have some activity. And that allows for some activity, massaging it, even if you don't have orgasms or have never had an orgasm, maybe, you know, massage the area, do something, because it's good to have some blood flow in all of our different areas. And this for men is especially true. A lot of times after prostate cancer, men just say, okay, I can't do it anymore, it's done, forgetting about it. But they have to have an awareness of that and know that there's an importance in massage and masturbation and that kind of thing to keep the tubes running, you know, keep everything going. So getting good sleep, having friends, important friends, good friends that are non-critical. We all have critical people in our life. We need to spend less time with those critical people and more time with the non-critical loving people. Some kind of spirituality. It doesn't have to be religion. It can be, you know, sometimes classical music, dance, the woods, the beach. That can be spiritual to people. I don't want to, you know, tell somebody that they have to be a certain way, but that can really add meaning. And then flossing your teeth. You know, I know that's an odd one, but flossing our teeth. It gets rid of a lot of bacteria. It keeps us healthier. It can stave off, I have heard, help with keeping Alzheimer's away from us and heart disease, and keep our teeth looking nicer. So now I'm done with that. I want questions. Does anybody have any questions? Anybody have questions for me? Yes?
I don't know if it's a question, but I know, like, when you were first talking about dissociation, I think this is really my first event to recognize that I had ovarian cancer, and am really facing it, because I think some sort of denial was happening, like going through the surgery. It just happened so fast. So I, you know, was diagnosed, surgery, chemo, and then I felt like I needed to stay positive for the people around me, and so there was some level of denial about that I really had it. You know, I'm going to this infusion center for 5 hours, you know, just for the heck of it. But I think I appreciate this discussion because it's important, I think, for me to get back in touch with, you know, really face it, and then acknowledge that I did have cancer, ovarian cancer, and it's scary to think about returning to intimacy again.
Are you in a partnered relationship?
I'm not. So this is actually giving me, you know, some direction in terms of when that happens. I'll know how to approach it and how to talk about it.
And I really think one of the best things you can do is get to know yourself and get to know how your body has changed, and how, you know, be as aware of you as you can be, because then the other person doesn't have to guess, and there doesn't have to be, you know, hurt feelings and confusion and all of that. So getting to know you.
Yeah, I think that's the thing I'm taking away from this, is the communication, and, you know, just opening up and saying this is, and recognizing too for myself, I think it'll be a new learning process. Things will be different. So, you know, finding out what kind, like you said, what kind of touch feels good and is, ugh.
Yeah, the communication in a relationship, whether there's been an illness or not, I'm finding that every couple that comes to me, for whatever reason, a lot of times they say, well, we have a sexual problem. Well, most of the time they have a communication problem. Yeah, maybe they have a sexual problem, but they're not talking. They don't know how to talk to each other. They don't know how to be nice to each other. No wonder they don't want to have sex, or one of them doesn't want to. So it's, you know, so much is involved with communication. And yeah, and then continue to come to things like this, you know, where you're around other people and you can talk freely and see how other people have gone through what you're going through. Yes?
Instant menopause for me was the big issue, and it's hot flashes. Because my husband, now I said, sleep in your winter pajamas.
Yeah.
He's like, it's too cold in here. So we're always struggling with the temperature thing. So then you've got that issue where I'm like, there is no covers. I'm laying there like this, and I'm hot all of the time.
Yeah.
I would think that would be, we do communicate about it, but it's an issue in intimacy too.
Yes.
Because I am a furnace.
Right, right.
I mean, he's like frightened because I get so hot.
Well, so you may find that doing some playful teasing things with ice cubes, you know.
I never even thought of that. The ice bucket
It's like
challenge
5
is better
or
than
done? Done. Okay. Yeah, ice cubes, you know, and that's the thing, is that sex doesn't have to be intercourse. It can be lots of different things. So how can you have fun together? How can you just bring back togetherness and fun and experimenting with that? And I think ice cubes would be, you know, a good thing. Or something that's cold that is not going to get everything wet. I'm getting the sign that we're done.
Those hot flashes, do those decrease, go away?
You know what? I am not the expert in that. So I think there's a doctor here. Isn't there a couple doctors here today? You should ask the doctor, because I don't know. I mean, I went into menopause as soon as I had my hysterectomy as well. And I'm lucky I don't get hot flashes. I get other things, but not that. So you're welcome. Okay, thank you, everybody.